When creating a Google form, the best place to start is where you'd like the form to live. It's very easy to want to just go to Google Forms, but if you start in the folder where you want the form to live, it's going to be organized and it'll be easy to find later. So I'd like my form to begin here in the Forms and Assessments folder. I'm just going to click New, More, and then choose Google Forms. And I'm going to create and share it with the same rights. So the first thing you need to do when you are creating a form is to give it a title. This ensures that you don't have 100 different forms, all that are named Untitled Form. Once you do that, it'll start saving. And if you click here, it takes the same name here that you typed in the title and begins the process. The next thing, you have a couple of options for the way your form looks. If you come over here to the theme, you can change the color. Usually defaults to purple, but you can pick from several options here. It gives you a range of background colors. But you also have the option to choose an image. So there's some pre-built-in ones here by title, or you can upload your own photos from your computer or use your albums from Google Photos here. So now that you've done that, you can get a little bit more detailed with your form. So over here on the side, you have some options. You can add a question, you can add a title, you can add an image, a YouTube video, or a section. And they might not seem very useful, but some of these are very, very helpful to have around. With forms that you're using, especially for students, because you teach multiple blocks and you're probably going to want to reuse that, you want to always add in a option for their name. It'll default to short answer, which is fine. You want them to type it. You can also, by clicking the three dots, give a description, which means to just to say what you want. And you can also decide if you want it to be a required question or not. And that bar turns it on. The other question I recommend is to ask what block. I'll show you how to default in a minute to we're collecting responses, but even then, because students, it just shows their student ID number, so you really want to make sure you have a way to sort out not just their student ID number, but their name and when they are. It just makes life easier. All right. So now I highly recommend these are the things you do, especially when you're doing with students. You ask these things every single time. And then my next suggestion is to add a section break before you start. There are a couple of reasons. It kind of helps break it up visually, and it lets have a little break between, like, especially if there are lots and lots of questions, it kind of just visually helps students deal better. And then there's some other features later that forms can be sorted based on how they answer, and you can have different questions for different kids. Think of it like a tree diagram. So, and then that comes into play when you choose a section based on answer by clicking the three dots. So just some possibilities for the future, but for right now, we'll just go over the basics. So to get started, you want to make sure the section that you're working in or the question that you're working in is highlighted blue on the side. And you can give each section a title, although you don't have to. You can add in pictures, and just like before with other resources, you can upload them, take a snapshot, that's a selfie. If you have the URL of the image from your albums, your drive, or by doing a search of Google Drive. So let's see. And here you have a couple of options. You can adjust the size. You can align it. You can give a description or not. You don't have to. And then from here, you can add questions. As you start typing, it actually will default to what type of question it thinks you want to answer. So Google's pretty smart about that, which can also be a little scary. Speaking of, you have several question choices. The short answer, the paragraph, multiple choice, checkboxes, a drop-down menu, a file upload, which is a cool new feature, a linear scale, a multiple choice grid, a checkbox grid, the date, and the time. So the next type of question you can add is multiple choice. So you start with a question, and then you have a couple of options. You can just start adding the words, or you can also choose a picture as your answer choice. So again, you have options to upload, snapshot, URL, albums, drive, or search. And this embeds the picture as the answer choice. You can do this for all the answer choices or just one. It's your choice. Obviously, if you're doing one, you may want to do all, but that's up to you. The next type of question is the checkboxes. This allows you to have students choose multiple correct answers within a question, kind of a choose all that apply option, and similar to one of the TEI type questions on the SOL if you're teaching an SOL course, or if you just want to give your students practice with types of questions they may see to help them be more successful. Again, you can also do a picture as this for them to choose all of the ones that you'd like, or it can just be words. All right, so now we have our choices. And again, you can make these questions required. Now that this is selected, I'm going to add a new section. And this time I'm going to insert a video. So you get the option to do the video search, or if you have the exact URL of the video, you can either paste it here or here. As with a picture, you can resize, click the three dots, and you can center align it. If you need to change the video, click here, or to delete it, click here. And now you can give some directions. As with all things, you want to make sure students know what to do, so include directions, give instructions, all of that as much as possible. So while this is selected, notice if this was here, I need to make sure that the blue bar is here so that my question goes underneath the video. So now I want to go to a drop-down menu. This way students only see one answer at a time, but it's a little drop-down menu, just like this, to view possible choices. If you have a file upload, you would want to add the actual question here. You can limit the file type here. You can limit how many they create, how many they can add, and then the size. So you have up to 10 gigabytes. Let's keep it there. And then you can change the file here to if you need to be able to upload more from like all of your classes. So just be very judicious in that one. you can make this. And that brings us to our next type of question, a linear scale. We'll change our rating number, 3. There you go. So the thing with the rating scale is that you would need to do each question. So if you have more than one question that you want them to rate, you would need to each time ask a new question. Our next type is a multiple choice grid. The next type of question you can add is a multiple choice grid. So for this one, we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to add a picture. And then our choices are going to be, and for this you'll want to require a response in each row so that every choice will have to be answered. The last option you have is very similar to the multiple choice grid. It's a checkbox grid, so very similar. You can also add the date. It adds the formatting so they can only see a calendar and click that, as well as the time. It lets them put a time of day. This is great for scheduling appointments and things like that. So now that we're here, the thing you want to look at now is to turn it into a quiz. So in the settings menu, you have 3 options. To collect email addresses, which I highly recommend for everyone, especially within our division. Restrict this, especially if you're doing this with students. Restrict this. You can decide whether or not they only get one chance to do it, or if you want to allow them to have multiple, if they can edit after they submit. I do not recommend turning this on, especially for quizzes, because then they can see responses of other students, and you want to keep things private. So you definitely want to leave that off. There's a reason it's defaulted. Under presentation, you have the option here to show how far along they are in the quiz or any survey, to shuffle the question order. That way they can't really cheat. They'll be on different questions at different times, as well as the answer choice order. This helps to make it a little bit more personal. So thanks for taking the quiz. And then last but not least, the quizzes feature. So by turning this on, you actually turn it into a quiz, and it allows you to assign point values to questions, choose the correct answers, and decide when to release the grades. If you have just blank multiple choice or very easy answered ones, then you can submit it have the grades go after each submission. If you do have a short answer or paragraphs, I recommend, because even though you can put possible answer choices, you definitely want to make sure you have all the possibilities, because if they spell something just a little bit wrong, it'll come up as a wrong answer. So here, but you can also just resubmit and it will re-notify. So don't feel like if you do this and you found an answer was incorrect, it'll resubmit the answer. I'm going to turn this on and hit save. So now we need to go through and assign point values for all of these that we've given. You'll notice up here now it says total points, and we can go in and add correct answers. So here we're not going to choose points for their name and their block, but here we're going to assign an answer key. So we can give some possible choices and add multiple things that we think students might add and possible answer choices. One suggestion is as students put in an answer, if it's actually correct, you can add that as a possible choice so that anyone who in the future answers that question also gets that correct, because you can come in and modify this at any time. So it will give you the option to mark everything else as incorrect, and you can add answer feedback. So that way they can, it'll give them a little bit of assistance. You can also include a link or even a video to rewatch. So this is especially helpful if you've turned on the option up here that they can resubmit. So now I want to add in the answer key. So I select here. I just put a check beside the correct answer. So now anything else will not be marked as correct. And I'm going to give this one 2 points. I'm going to come back and give this one 5 points. And you'll notice it tabulates the total points available up here as you add them in. So for this question, because it is a checkbox, I'm going to create my answer key. I'm going to give this 2 points, and these are my 2 correct answers. So now if they choose more than this, it's not correct. So just keep that in mind. If you want to edit the question, you can come back and edit it again. This one, I would either leave this as a 0 because maybe you're just giving them credit for uploading a document. That's up to you. This one, because it's a rating, it's pretty subjective. However, this one, we're going to add the answer key. So then you have to check the correct. And you'll need to assign a point for each individual section, each little question here. And then you don't have to give an answer for each one. It can just be just to fill out. So don't feel like every single one needs an answer choice. So now that we have set this up, we want to look at where your responses are going to go. So my one recommendation when you're using any kind of a form is to turn the responses into a Google Sheet. This makes it easier to see. This makes it easier to analyze the data. And the nice thing is that if you go back as a quiz and modify it, you'll see all of the results there. And it's just much more user-friendly than looking at the response form. So to do that, you have this button here that says create a spreadsheet. You also have this for some other options. So the first thing we're going to do is to create a spreadsheet. It's going to default to naming the spreadsheet what the name of the form is, which is very helpful. Click create. So now it has a spreadsheet. Because we turned on that feature for email, it has the email address. But of course, if you just did that with students, it would be their student ID at Hopewell, which is why we added in this column here for their name. It also has the timestamp for when it was completed, as well as a column for their score, which has been added in. So now anytime the form is filled out, it will collect responses and it will dump this information into the Google form. Okay, so now we have a response. You'll notice the first is a summary where you can scroll down and see how students did. I don't recommend this as a way to actually grade students and to see their work, just because it becomes very, 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 very complicated, because this page has every student. So right now there's one, but when there are 20 or 30, you don't see by individual student. You can look at it by question. The individual response is a little bit better for evaluating. It's nice to, if they got a question right, or say you wanted to add their response and or override what was written, you can give them the points here, and that's fine. It can be very helpful, especially and this is how I would recommend if you want to grade and assess, like the short answer and the paragraph form would be to do it from here. So you can see very quickly which ones were incorrect, which ones were correct. But my preferred way for looking at, so if I come over here to my form, you can see the score and you can see all of the resources, all the answers, all the things that students chose, including the words. Now, 17 out of 27. If I come over here and say, if I come over here and want to give an updated score for this, I can save that. And now the points have adjusted here as well as here on the form. So you can very quickly grade and look at to record in your gradebook. So I do recommend every time you create a quiz, you actually take it yourself. You're the first one to answer it. You create your spreadsheet. You look at the results just to make sure that it goes exactly the way that you had intended, that the way you want it to work, students see, and there's no confusion. By practicing it yourself, being that model, you know what students will see and think about how they might answer and or interact. Because when we're creating in our heads, it sometimes doesn't quite translate how we're thinking to how students are thinking. So that's just a good practice to get into with a form. The next thing you're going to want to do, now that you've created it, you actually want to share it with students. So you do have this big old button here called send. And if you're just wanting to email to students, that's fine. Or if you're sharing it with colleagues that you want to send out, this is a great way to do it. You add in the email addresses, you change this, and you give it a more personalized message. You also have the option to include that form in the email so they can answer it directly. You can send the direct link, which is always helpful, but when you're sharing to Google Classroom for students to create it as a quiz, there's something even easier. Here I am in Classroom. If I want to create the assignment here, I would choose the Drive icon. Because I've just been working on it, it's going to be recent. But if I choose the form here and add, it's going to import the grade, which is really awesome, into the Google Classroom. You can assign your due date. Once you give it a title, now this will only allow one response, so just keep that in mind. If you're allowing students to go back and reevaluate, keep that in mind. And then you can then go ahead and schedule it just as you would normally. And students will see and to be taken right to the form to fill out. They won't have to like open a link or go to their email or anything like that. So scheduling it in Classroom is very easy. You have a couple of other options. Um, the add collaborators is if you're working with another teacher. You really wouldn't want to use this with students. This is only if you're working with someone else who's going to add input into the form. So do not use this to add students unless you're working with them to create the form for classmates. You can, of course, print the form. If you use certain types over and over with certain types of questions, make a copy is very useful. And then here's your undo button if you make a mistake and accidentally delete something or add something that you didn't want to. So I hope this has been helpful as an introduction. There are way more features to Google Forms that we didn't even get into, but hopefully this is a good introduction for you.